You are surrounded by people. You have friends, you have family, you have colleagues who know your name and ask how you are doing. You have a phone full of contacts and social media, accounts full of connections. And yet, there is something inside you that feels completely, utterly alone. Not the loneliness of being physically isolated, something deeper than that. Something that doesn't go away when you enter a room full of people. Something that actually gets worse in a crowd. A quiet, persistent feeling that nobody truly sees you, that nobody truly knows you, that even in your closest relationships, there is a version of you that remains entirely unreachable to anyone else. If you have ever felt this, you are not broken. You are not dramatic. You are not asking for too much. You are experiencing one of the most widespread and least talked about psychological experiences of our time. And the science behind it reveals something that will fundamentally change the way you understand yourself and every relationship you have ever had.
In 2023, the United States Surgeon General issued an official advisory declaring loneliness a public health epidemic, not a personal weakness, not a lifestyle choice, a public health crisis with consequences as serious as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Research from Brigham Young University found that loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%. It weakens the immune system. It raises cortisol levels. It increases inflammation throughout the body. It significantly elevates the risk of heart disease, stroke, dementia, and depression. And yet, we have never been more connected in the history of human civilization. More social media, more messaging apps, more ways to reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. More content, more noise, more stimulation than any generation before us has ever had to process. And we are lonelier than ever. This is not a coincidence. The same technology that promises connection is in many cases actively deepening the wound, and understanding exactly how and why this happens is the first step towards something that actually works. Before we go further, it is essential to understand a distinction that psychology makes very clearly, a distinction that most people have never been taught, and that changes everything. There is a profound difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is a physical state. It simply means that no other people are physically present. And for many people, introverts in particular, but not only introverts, being alone is not just tolerable, it is necessary. It is restorative. It is where they think most clearly, feel most themselves, and recharge most effectively. Loneliness is an entirely different experience. Loneliness is not about the number of people around you. It is about the quality of connection you feel or fail to feel with the people in your life. You can be deeply lonely in a marriage. You can be deeply lonely in a large family. You can be deeply lonely at a party where everyone is laughing. You can be deeply lonely in a city of 10 million people. And you can feel completely connected, completely seen and known and belonging, entirely alone in a quiet room with nothing but your own thoughts and a sense of peace. Loneliness is not about presence. It is about resonance. Here is something that will change the way you think about loneliness forever. It is not a psychological weakness. It is not a character flaw. It is not the result of being too sensitive or too needy or not trying hard enough to connect. Loneliness is a biological signal. Just as hunger tells your body that it needs food and thirst tells your body that it needs water, loneliness tells your body that it needs connection. It is an alarm system built into your nervous system over millions of years of evolution, designed to motivate you to seek out and maintain the social bonds that kept your ancestors alive. For most of human history, being cut off from the group was a death sentence. No shelter, no food, no protection from predators. The human animal was not built for isolation. We are at the deepest biological level, a social species. Connection is not a luxury. It is a survival need as fundamental as eating and breathing. This is why loneliness hurts, physically, research shows that social pain activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. Being excluded, rejected, or ignored literally hurts your body in the same way that touching a hot stove does. Your biology is not being dramatic. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. So why, in an age of unprecedented connection, are we experiencing unprecedented loneliness? This is what researchers call the loneliness paradox, and the answer lies in a crucial distinction between two different types of connection. The first type is what we might call surface connection. It is interaction without depth, conversation without vulnerability, presence without intimacy. It is the connection of small talk, of social performance, of curated online personas, of saying fine when someone asks how you are, even when you are absolutely not fine. The second type is what psychologists call deep connection. It is the experience of being truly known by another person, your fears, your contradictions, your failures, your most honest thoughts, and being accepted and valued anyway. Social media, messaging apps, and most modern social interaction are extraordinarily effective at producing surface connection. They can give you the appearance of a full social life, likes, comments, group chats, followers, while providing almost none of the deep connection that the human nervous system actually needs to feel less alone. You can spend 8 hours a day consuming content and communicating with hundreds of people and go to bed feeling more isolated than someone who spent the day entirely alone. One of the most painful aspects of modern loneliness is this: many of the loneliest people are the ones who appear from the outside to be the most connected. The life of the party who goes home to an empty apartment and sits in silence. The person with thousands of followers who has nobody to call when something goes wrong. The high achiever surrounded by admirers who has never let a single one of them see who they really are. This kind of loneliness, the loneliness of the performer, of the one who has learned to be exactly what every room needs them to be, is perhaps the most isolating of all, because it comes with an added layer of shame. If I seem so connected, why do I feel so alone? If people seem to like me so much, why do I feel like none of them actually know me? If I am so good at being with people, why do their company leave me feeling emptier than before? The answer is that performance is not connection. Likability is not intimacy. And the very skills that make someone socially successful, the ability to read a room, to adapt, to be whatever is needed, can become the walls that keep genuine connection permanently at a distance. At the root of most chronic loneliness is not a lack of opportunity for connection. It is fear. Fear of being truly seen and found lacking. Fear that if someone knew the real you, the insecure parts, the contradictory parts, the parts you are ashamed of, they would leave. That the connection would end. That the rejection would confirm what you have always suspected about yourself. And so you show people a version of yourself that feels safe to show. Edited, curated, controlled. You give them access to the parts you are proud of and carefully guard the rest. And the terrible irony is this: the parts of yourself you are most afraid to show are almost always the parts that would create the deepest connection if you allowed them to be seen. Vulnerability, genuine, unguarded vulnerability is the only pathway to real intimacy. Research by Brené Brown and dozens of others confirms this consistently. You cannot have deep connection without risk. You cannot be truly known without showing what you have been hiding. But if your experience of showing those hidden parts in the past led to rejection, to humiliation, to being taken advantage of, and your nervous system learned a lesson, and it will do everything in its power to make sure you never take For most people who experience chronic loneliness, the kind that persists, regardless of how many people are in their life, the roots go back much further than adulthood. The child who was consistently misunderstood by their family, who felt different, too sensitive, too intense, too curious, too much, in ways that were never validated or celebrated but only met with confusion or correction. The child who learned early that sharing their real thoughts and feelings led to dismissal or ridicule. who discovered that being accepted required performing a version of themselves that felt fundamentally untrue, who got the message subtly or directly that who they actually were was not quite right. That child learned to hide, and the adult that child became is still hiding, often so automatically, so seamlessly, that they don't even realize they are doing it. They have simply come to experience their authentic self as something that must be kept private, something that is not quite safe to bring into relationship. And as long as that remains true, genuine connection will always remain just out of reach. There is an important conversation to have about introversion and loneliness, because they are frequently confused, and that confusion causes real harm. Introversion is not loneliness. Introversion is a neurological orientation toward the world in which social interaction consumes energy rather than generating it. Introverts need solitude the way extroverts need stimulation, not because something is wrong with them, but because their nervous systems are wired differently. Many introverts have deeply fulfilling social lives. They simply prefer fewer, deeper connections over many shallow ones. They may socialize less frequently and need more recovery time after social interaction. But when they are with the people they trust, they are fully present, deeply engaged, and genuinely connected. The problem comes when introversion gets tangled with fear, when the preference for solitude becomes a way of avoiding the vulnerability that connection requires. When aloneness stops being chosen and restorative and starts being a hiding place. Many introverts carry a quiet grief about this, a sense that they are built for depth but rarely find it. That small talk is genuinely painful, not because they are antisocial, but because it feels like a waste of the only currency they have, their attention and their authentic presence. We need to talk honestly about what social media and digital communication are doing to human connection, because the evidence is no longer ambiguous. Multiple large-scale studies have now confirmed what many people feel intuitively. Heavy social media use is associated with increased loneliness, increased depression, and decreased sense of belonging, particularly in young people, but not only in young people. The mechanism is not complicated. Social media is designed by some of the most sophisticated behavioral psychologists and engineers in the world to keep you engaged. And one of the most effective ways to keep you engaged is to trigger a very specific emotional experience, the sense that everyone else's life is fuller, more successful, more connected, and more joyful than yours. This is not an accident, it is a feature. The comparison that social media constantly invites your authentic inner experience against everyone else's curated highlight reel is a comparison you are neurologically incapable of winning. And every time you lose it, the loneliness deepens. The sense that you are somehow outside of a party that everyone else is attending becomes more entrenched. Here is one of the most important findings in the entire field of loneliness research, and it is one that most people find genuinely surprising. The number of relationships you have matters far less than the quality of even one of them. Research by social psychologist John Cacioppo, who spent decades studying loneliness and is considered the world's leading expert on the subject, found consistently that what protects against loneliness is not having many friends. It is having at least one relationship characterized by what he called mutually caring and authentic connection. One person who truly knows you, one person with whom you can be completely honest, one person whose care for you is not contingent on your performance or your appearance or your success, one relationship where you do not have to edit yourself. This means that the solution to loneliness is not to socialize more. It is not to push yourself to attend more events or meet more people or accumulate more contacts. It is to go deeper in the connections you already have, or to find one person with whom that depth is possible, and to have the courage to actually let them in. One of the most underrated skills in human connection, and one of the most powerful antidotes to loneliness, on both sides of a conversation is the ability to truly listen, not to wait for your turn to speak, not to formulate your response while the other person is still talking, not to listen for the parts of the conversation that are relevant to you and filter out the rest, to listen with your full attention, to be genuinely curious about the experience of the person in front of you, to ask the follow-up question that shows you heard what they actually said, not just the surface of it. Research shows that feeling truly listened to, genuinely heard, not just acknowledged, is one of the most powerful experiences of connection a human being can have, and it is extraordinarily rare. Most conversations are two people taking turns talking at each other while privately thinking about themselves. Real listening, and the kind that makes another person feel seen, is so uncommon that when it happens, people remember it for years. You have the ability to give this to someone today, and in doing so, you will likely receive something you have been looking for without knowing it. Brené Brown spent years researching shame, vulnerability, and human connection, and her most consistent finding, replicated across thousands of interviews and studies, was this: vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. There is no path to genuine intimacy that does not pass through vulnerability. You cannot be truly known by someone you are hiding from. You cannot feel genuinely connected to someone who only knows the edited version of you. This does not mean sharing everything with everyone. Vulnerability without discernment is not connection, it is disclosure, and indiscriminate. Disclosure often leads to exactly the kind of painful experiences that make people more closed, not less. Real vulnerability is calibrated. It is offered carefully to people who have demonstrated that they can be trusted with it. It is reciprocal, a mutual opening, not a one-sided confession. And it is gradual. Trust is built in small moments, not grand revelations. But it must begin somewhere. Someone has to go first. Someone has to take the risk of saying something true instead of something safe. And in almost every case, that act of honesty, however terrifying, is what transforms an ordinary relationship into something that actually sustains a human life. Human beings evolved in groups, not large anonymous groups, but small, intimate communities where everyone knew each other, where roles were clear, where belonging was visible and tangible and daily. For most of human history, this kind of community was simply the structure of life. You were born into it, you lived your entire life within it. Leaving it was almost inconceivable. Modern life has dismantled this almost entirely. We move cities for jobs, we change careers. We live in apartment buildings where we don't know our neighbors' names. We consume entertainment alone in our rooms. We have replaced physical community with digital community, and discovered that digital community, for all its convenience, cannot fully replace what it is trying to replicate. The research is clear. People who belong to a community, a religious community, a sports team, a volunteer organization, a creative group, any gathering of people who meet regularly around a shared purpose, report significantly lower levels of loneliness, regardless of the size or nature of that community. The shared purpose matters. The regularity matters. The physical presence matters. These are not optional extras for human well-being. They are structural needs that, when unmet, produce exactly the epidemic we are living through. In the middle of a video about loneliness, it is worth pausing to say something that might seem counterintuitive. Learning to be alone, genuinely, comfortably, peacefully alone, is one of the most important things you can do for your relationships. There is a difference between loneliness, the painful experience of unwanted isolation, and solitude, the chosen, nourishing experience of time alone with yourself. People who cannot tolerate being alone tend to enter relationships from a place of desperate need. They need the other person to fill a void that can only truly be filled from the inside. And that need, however understandable, places an unsustainable burden on every relationship they enter. Learning to enjoy your own company, to find the time you spend with yourself interesting and restorative rather than threatening, changes the quality of everything. You stop needing others to make you feel okay. You start choosing connection from a place of genuine desire rather than desperate hunger. And paradoxically, when you no longer need people the way a drowning person needs air, you become far more capable of the kind of easy, generous, undemanding presence that actually draws people toward you. Here's a question worth sitting with. How well do you actually know yourself? Not the version of yourself you present to the world, not the identity you have constructed from your achievements and your roles in your relationships, the actual interior experience of being you, your genuine values, your authentic desires, your real fears, the things that move you and the things that drain you. Many chronically lonely people, when they examine this honestly, discover something unexpected. They don't actually know themselves very well. They have spent so much of their energy performing for others, adapting to others, managing others' perceptions of them, that they have lost touch with the interior life that would give them something real to bring to a relationship. You cannot truly connect with others if you are disconnected from yourself. The depth of your relationships with other people will rarely exceed the depth of your relationship with yourself. This is why solitude, genuine, reflective solitude, is not the enemy of connection. It is the prerequisite. The time you spend truly getting to know yourself, your actual thoughts, not the ones you think you should have, is time you spend building the foundation that every real relationship requires. When researchers study what actually makes people feel less lonely, not theoretically, but in their daily lived experience, the findings are consistently surprising to people who expect grand solutions. The experiences that most reliably reduce loneliness are not dramatic. They are not the result of finding your soulmate, or your perfect friend group, or your ideal community, as important as those things are. They are small moments of genuine human contact. The conversation with the cashier where both of you actually laughed at something. The moment a stranger made eye contact and nodded, acknowledging your shared humanity in a wordless second. The text from someone who remembered something you mentioned 3 weeks ago and thought of you. The colleague who asked how you were and waited for the real answer. These micro moments of connection, what psychologist Barbara Fredrickson calls positivity resonance, have a measurable impact on loneliness, on well-being, on physical health. They are available to almost everyone, almost every day, and they require nothing more than the willingness to be present for another human being for 60 seconds. The question is not whether opportunities for connection exist. They are everywhere. The question is whether you are showing up for them. Loneliness often carries grief inside it, and that grief deserves to be acknowledged. The grief of friendships that faded without either person fully choosing to end them. The grief of the community you had in one stage of life and lost when circumstances changed. The grief of relationships that looked from the outside like what you needed but never actually gave you what you were hungry for. The grief of time spent in connection that was actually just performance. Of years in relationships where you were present but not truly there. Of conversations that covered everything except what mattered. And for many people, the grief of never having experienced, even once, the feeling of being completely known and completely accepted by another person. This grief is real. It is not self-pity. It does not mean that connection is impossible for you or that you have missed your chance. It means that you are a human being with real needs that have not been fully met, and that you are honest enough to acknowledge it. Grieving what was missing is not the same as resigning yourself to its permanent absence. It is, in fact, the clearing that makes space for something new. Everything we have discussed comes down eventually to courage. The courage to reach out first, even knowing you might be rejected, even knowing the other person might not respond in kind. The courage to say something honest in a conversation that has been hovering at the surface. To answer fine with something true, even just occasionally, even just with people you think might be able to hear it. The courage to stay in a difficult conversation instead of deflecting with humor or changing the subject, or suddenly remembering somewhere else you need to be. The courage to let someone do something kind for you without immediately deflecting or minimizing or returning the favor so quickly that you never actually receive it. The courage to say, I have been feeling lonely, not as a dramatic confession, not as a bid for sympathy, but as the simple, honest acknowledgement of a real human experience offered to someone you think might understand, you will be surprised how often that honesty is met not with awkwardness or judgment, but with relief, because the person across from you is almost certainly carrying the same feeling and has been waiting for someone to say it first. Connection is not something that happens to you. It is something you practice. Like any meaningful skill, it requires consistent effort, deliberate attention, and a willingness to be uncomfortable in the service of something important. It requires showing up, not just when it is convenient or when you feel like it, or when the circumstances are ideal. Consistently, through the periods when conversation is easy and through the periods when it is hard, through the misunderstandings and the repairs, through the seasons when a friendship is effortless and the seasons when it takes work. It requires investing attention in people, remembering what matters to them, following up on things they mentioned, demonstrating through small actions that they occupy space in your mind between the moments you are physically together. It requires being willing to be the one who reaches out, even when you feel like it should be their turn, even when you are tired, even when part of you would rather protect yourself from the possibility of not being met, because the alternative, waiting for connection to find you, waiting for the perfect circumstances, waiting until you feel ready, is not waiting. It is choosing slowly and quietly to remain alone. Here is something that the loneliness research consistently reveals and that modern culture has largely forgotten. Human physical contact is not a luxury, it is a biological necessity. Touch, safe, consensual, appropriate human touch triggers the release of oxytocin, the neurochemical most associated with bonding and trust. It reduces cortisol, it lowers blood pressure, it regulates the nervous system in ways that no amount of digital communication can replicate. Studies of premature infants who were, when all other care was identical, neurological development, and long-term health outcomes. We have developed elaborate social norms around personal space and professional conduct that have, as a side effect, dramatically reduced the amount of casual, friendly, physical contact that human beings experience in daily life. This is not a trivial loss. The body experiences it as a real absence, weeks or longer without. The nervous system registers this, and it hurts. Show dramatic differences in survival rates, held versus those who were not, even. And yet in many cultures, particularly in the modern West, adults touch each other extraordinarily little, something they may go days. One of the most reliable and least discussed pathways out of chronic loneliness is the experience of meaning, specifically the experience of contributing to something larger than yourself. Research consistently shows that people who feel their life has purpose, who feel that what they do matters, that they are part of something that extends beyond their individual experience, report significantly lower levels of loneliness even when their social lives are relatively limited. This makes evolutionary sense. Loneliness, as we discussed, is a signal that you are disconnected from the group. But the group connection our nervous systems are seeking is not merely social. It is functional. It is the experience of mattering, of being needed, of having a role that contributes to the collective well-being in a way that is visible and valued. Volunteering reduces loneliness consistently across cultures and demographics. Not because it increases your social contacts, though it often does, but because it gives you the experience of being useful, of your presence making a difference, of belonging to something through contribution, rather than through mere attendance. You do not need a grand purpose. You need a real one, something that asks something of you and gives you back the experience of mattering. Real connection takes time. This is perhaps the most important and most inconvenient truth about loneliness and its cure. We live in a culture that prizes speed. Instant connection, immediate intimacy, the idea that chemistry, that electric sense of recognition with another person, should happen fast, or it probably will not happen at all. But research on friendship formation, specifically the work of Jeffrey Hall at the University of Kansas, found that it takes approximately 50 hours of time spent together to move from acquaintance to casual friend, 90 hours to become a genuine friend, and 200 hours of shared time to develop the kind of close friendship that genuinely protects against loneliness. 200 hours in a culture where most adult social interaction happens in brief, scheduled encounters. This kind of accumulated time together requires genuine, sustained intention. It requires choosing the same people again and again, showing up for the ordinary moments, not just the special ones. Being willing to invest significant time in a relationship before it pays the dividends you are hoping for. This is not a romantic notion. It is simply what connection actually requires. And understanding it may be the thing, and your attention most fundamentally. At some point, and this is perhaps the most important moment in this entire conversation, loneliness stops being something that is simply happening to you and becomes something that requires a choice. Not a single dramatic choice, a series of small daily choices. The choice to reach out instead of waiting, to stay in the uncomfortable conversation instead of retreating, to show something true instead of something safe, to invest time in a relationship that doesn't yet feel worth the investment, but might become so if you stay. The choice to put down the phone and be genuinely present with the person in front of you, to attend the thing you said you would attend, to follow up on the conversation that felt meaningful instead of letting it dissolve back into the noise. These choices are small. They are not glamorous. They do not look like the transformation scenes in movies, but they are cumulatively the actual substance of a connected life. And they are available to you, regardless of your history, regardless of how long you have been lonely, regardless of how many times connection has disappointed you or how many times you have retreated behind the walls. That felt safer than the risk of being truly known. The choice is available right now, today. Loneliness is not a life sentence. It is not a personality trait. It is not evidence that you are fundamentally unlovable or that genuine connection is not available to someone like you. It is a signal, a painful, persistent, biologically encoded signal that something your human nature requires, real, deep, mutual, authentic connection, is not currently present in your life in sufficient quantity or quality. And like all signals, its purpose is not to punish you. Its purpose is to direct you toward honesty, toward courage, toward the people in your life who might become more if you let them, toward the communities that exist and are waiting for someone exactly like you to show up, toward the version of yourself that is capable of both giving and receiving the connection your biology has been asking for. You were not built for isolation. You were built for belonging. Belonging, real, earned, chosen. Belonging is possible for you. It requires courage. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to be seen before you are certain. It is safe, but it is possible. Subscribe. Every Sunday we go somewhere real together. Mind Decoded. See you next week.